Hey YouTube, this is Justin with Alternative Drummer. Today I've got a really cool review for you guys, and what I'm going to be talking about is the Simmons SD1000 drum module. Now this drum module came out as part of the Simmons SD1000 drum kit and the Simmons SD1500 drum kits. I think the 1000 came out around 2014 and the 1500 probably 2015, something like that. But at the time of their release, they were basically Simmons flagship drum sets, and the SD1000 at the time was the best drum module Simmons had made after they had been acquired by Guitar Center and basically rebooted, you know, since the 1980s. Now I'm sure a lot of you out there know this already, but some of you might not, that Simmons in the 1980s were without a doubt the #1 electronic drum manufacturer in the world. Basically every popular music act had those hexagonal shapes on stage and everybody was playing Simmons drums. They were very, very popular. They defined the sound of the 80s. Their sounds were really unique and really different than standard acoustic drums. And at the time of the 1980s, people wanted a new sound and they just gravitated towards the original Simmons drums. If you fast forward into the 90s, electronic drums became very uncool. Grunge became popular, bands like Nirvana, Soundgarden, Mudhoney, etc. The sound was just stripped down. It was hard rock. There was no electronics, not even synthesizers in any of that music. It was just straight up rock with guitars, bass, and drums. And electronic drums just became very, very uncool at that time. With some minor exceptions like bands like 9 Inch Nails and Ministry and some of the more industrial bands who were embracing the electronic stuff but just doing it a little bit differently. The vast majority of music out there was not using electronic drums. Fast forward again into the 2000s, Guitar Center acquired the Simmons name and started releasing drums that were wildly unpopular. A lot of the early kits that Guitar Center released under the Simmons name were essentially Modeli kits that were just rebranded as Simmons products. Now Simmons weren't the only company doing this. There were a lot of companies out there making drums this way, and in fact a lot of them still do, but they have gotten much better working with the overseas partners than they were in the beginning. Now the original Simmons products of the 1980s are highly sought after. They're very valuable. The SDS5 costs around $4,000 if you can find one in good shape. Sometimes even more, upwards of $6,000, and that's just for the module. I'm not even talking about the drums. If you want to get the complete set, you're going to look at spending around $10,000 to $12,000 for a working SDS5. Since I've been working with Simmons drums recently and doing some reviews of their products, I became really interested in this company. And I really think what they're doing right now is actually really good. I'm very impressed with their current products. But then I started researching the period that everybody seems to hate. And I was like, you know, are these really that bad? So I started searching them out and looking at used Simmons modules on Reverb and eBay. And first I picked up an SD5K drum module. And you might have seen my video that I upload where I'm just playing the drum and bass demo song out of that module. And I haven't really got to experiment with that one too much because it's kind of hard to get it to work accurately with the triggers that I own. So that one, you know, I actually think it's pretty cool. It's got some cool sounds in it, but largely useless if you're trying to build your own kit. Then in my search, I stumbled across the SD1000. Now the SD1000, by my observation, seems to be the first drum module where Simmons was really like, okay, we're gonna do something really cool now. We're gonna put together a drum module in a kit that is going to be really good. It's gonna have a lot of professional features and people are gonna like this thing. Unfortunately, I really don't think it really did that well compared to other drum makers at the time like Alesis and Yamaha and Roland. But I'm here to tell you, in my opinion, this drum module is highly underrated. It has some features in there that are professional, as well as some very weird features that I like quite a bit. In addition to that, those classic Simmons sounds are present on basically every single Simmons module that Guitar Center has made, and the ones that are in the SD1000 are especially good. Since I got this drum module, I actually hooked it up to my Titan 50 kit that Simmons sent me, and it's working actually really good on the Titan 50. I wasn't able to use the Titan 50 cable harness because that one actually had the drums mapped to different cables. So thankfully the Simmons 1000 that I ordered came with the cable harness and I was able, or the wiring harness, and I was able to use that to hook it up to the Titan 50. Now I found this module for really cheap, and currently at the time of making this video, there's one on eBay right now for like $10. So you can find these things for cheap. at least at the time of making this video. The one I got did have a dead internal battery in it, and it was pretty easy to replace. I just had to take out the motherboard, and thankfully it had a battery holder that I didn't have to solder or anything like that. The old battery just popped right out. I put a new one in there and I put it back together and everything's working fine. So let me tell you about some of the features of this drum module that I really like. There are 518 different drum voices in this module. And in addition to there being acoustic sounds and acoustic cymbals, there is a plethora of electronic and just interesting sounds in there that I just love to play with. The stock kits, you know, some of them sound okay. The cymbals are not amazing sounding, but you know, you can find a few in there that sound pretty good. But that's not really why I'm interested in this drum module. I like to make my own kits and store them to the user patches in the drum module. And so far I've made a few and I absolutely love how they sound. There's some really great vintage Simmons tones in there, as well as just random electronic sounds, world percussion sounds, and just really cool stuff that if you just play with it enough, you can actually build some really interesting and cool sounding kits. And I'm going to show you some of those a little bit later on, as well as a song that I composed where I play a custom kit that I created in the SD1000. The snare drum is actually dual zone compatible. All the toms are dual zone compatible if you install the firmware update. The cymbals are all dual zone. The ride is actually triple zone, and the snare and the second floor tom are both triple zone as well. I don't currently own a Simmons triple zone snare drum. They released those at the time of making this kit, so I can't really use the 3 zones that it came with. And I'm not even really sure what those 3 zones actually did, but I actually found one on eBay. It's a rubber pad, and it was only like 20 bucks or something. So I just ordered one, and when it comes, I'll do an update of this video and see what I can do with those 3 zones. It has an actual variable hi-hat controller. So that means it has, you know, not just close and open, it has in-between sounds as well. There's 2 expansion ports on the module. You have Tom 4 and Crash 2, pretty much just like a lot of the newer modules today. There is an auxiliary input, which is a standard 1/8" input. There's stereo left and right outputs. There's also a headphone output with an independent volume. There's an independent volume control for the auxiliary input. And there's DIN MIDI in and output, as well as USB MIDI input and output. And there's also an SD card slot on this module. The SD card is actually something that is really cool, and it's not exactly what you might think, but you could do some really interesting things with this SD card slot. It has a ton of preset songs, 100 preset songs in it that you could play to. If you compare that to the Titan 50, which has 3, you know, it's kind of crazy that they've stopped putting so many songs in the modules, but I guess, you know, they just found that a lot of people weren't using them. But it's still pretty cool that they're there. There's a lot of things that you can jam to. In addition to those songs, you can also store up to 100 user songs. And what's really interesting about that is this thing actually has a built-in MIDI sequencer in it. And it's not just able to record drums. There's actually synthesizer and guitar sounds and bass sounds and all of those other sounds in this module. And so if you hook a MIDI controller up to this module, you can actually play keyboard parts that are coming out of the module, and you can record them inside of this module. It even will quantize MIDI, which is kind of insane. You know, like no modules today really do this. The Roland modules in the early 2000s kind of did things like this module does, with having internal MIDI sequencers like the TD8 and the TD6. They have those. So you could do that in those as well. But aside from that, not many other drum modules, especially ones being made right now, have some of the features that the SD1000 has. All right, so that's basically the intro. Now what I want to do is zoom in on this thing and show you guys some of the things that I really like about it. And then after that, I'm going to show you some of the custom kits that I've created, as well as play you a song that I made using this drum module. Anyway, here we go. Okay, so here's my unit, and the screen is actually kind of hard to capture on video, but it actually does look pretty good when I'm actually looking at it in my room. It's just kind of like a electric blue screen with a dark blue text, but it's very readable, and I guess you can see it right there, but if I back away, it just sort of washes out. But here's the layout of the module, and you can see here we have a master volume, and then up here we have kit, and this is basically your button that you press to scroll through all the different kits. So we just go through here with this big wheel. You can go through all the different kits that way. And then here we have our songs, song button. So we go there, we can scroll through all the different songs. You can see there is a ton of them. Okay, so if we go in here to utility, you can see the first thing that comes up is trigger settings. And if we just press enter over here, then you can go through the different settings with this page button. And then we have sensitivity, threshold, velocity, curve, retrigger cancel, and crosstalk. There's no mask time or anything like that, so you really can't dial it in like you can on a Roland module. So keep that in mind. This probably isn't the best module for like acoustic to electric conversions. But if you have pads, Simmons or Roland style pads, most of them should work. But, you know, I don't know. I've only really tried the Titan 50, which basically everything seems to work. And, well, no, that's not true. I'm using a Roland ride cymbal, and that's working just fine. And I'm also using a lemon cymbal right here, and I get the choke out of that. Both zones are working on the lemon ride, and then the choke is working on the Simmons cymbal that I have over there. So yeah, I mean, it does seem to work with a variety of triggers, but like I said, it's probably not the best for an acoustic conversion. But if you're using electronic drum triggers, then it should work pretty well. If we go back to utility, and then we press page without going into the trigger settings, you can see there's also effects. So here, this is actually really cool. If we press enter here, there's reverb effects. And then if we also scroll through these, we have reverb type hall. Reverb type hall, 1, 2, plate, delay, and pan delay, which is like a ping pong delay. Now the delay is cool, but the only problem with that is I can't seem to find a way to make it, you know, like control the delay speed. It just sort of is what it is. And I haven't found a way to do it, and there's nothing in the manual about it. So it's cool that it's there, but you don't really have a whole lot of control over it. This panel right here is actually just all the different triggers, so you can actually press these buttons to hear the different drums. If you don't want to go through, you know, and hit the drums to do the editing that way, you can just touch it right there and trigger the module that way. Now, if you wanted to edit kits, all you have to do is press this menu button down here, and then you'll see voice is the first thing that pops up, and then we can just press enter there, and then everything's grouped by category. So we have all our snares and hi-hats, crashes. There's also hi-hat group, which is really cool. So you can go and actually, you know, if you want to change the hi-hat, you could set it on hi-hat group, and that way all the hi-hats change, you know, with the pedal and everything. You don't have to individually change every single, you know, open hi-hat, closed hi-hat, and all that stuff. They'll all change together. Also in the voice edit, if we page through here, you can also see that there's volume, panning, pitch. Now the pitch, actually, you can drastically change the pitch of the drums, which makes for some really cool editing and fun editing. There's decay, as well as reverb level, MIDI note. Now this is very nice for the USB, so you can assign individual MIDI notes for every single trigger. And now here is something else this is very useful if you're an Ableton user. Duration. Now this is really important because Ableton can be tricky to get cymbal chokes to work. You need this feature to make cymbal chokes to work in Ableton Live if you're using a VST plugin. I don't remember the specifics of that, but I know I've done it before. And the only way you could do it is in Ableton 11. It doesn't even work in Ableton 10. But I think what you have to do is actually extend this duration of the MIDI note. So to give you enough time to be able to choke the cymbal, you can do that there. You can determine the time there. Here is the card function. So if we go into here, you can see I have a card in here already, and I even have a folder with MIDI in there. If I enter into that, I have like a test that I did in here just to, you know, to see how the MIDI worked, if I could play back a MIDI file. And it does work, but it has very specific requirements as to what channels you can use. Basically, you can, the drums are going to be on 10 and percussion is going to be on 11, channel 11, and then the other channels that are available are 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16. So as long as you have a MIDI file with those channels being used, you could potentially create a song on your computer and then put it on an SD card and load it into the Simmons module and play it back via the Simmons MIDI instruments within this module. I know that's a lot to think about, but you could do it if you really wanted to. The other thing you could do, like I said before, is you could actually record. You can record a MIDI controller into this thing. You could plug it in and actually play. I actually did a little test of this. I'm not going to show you any of that. I'll probably make a separate video on that because I haven't really done a whole lot with it yet, but I tested it and it does work. I was able to get keyboard sounds out of here, guitar sounds, by plugging a MIDI controller into it. and playing around with the different channels and things like that. So it's pretty cool. And it also quantizes, like I said. So in the card feature, you can also save kits, but actually that would be done here if we go, let me just show you how to do this real quick. So let's go into my user kits, the ones that I created already. And then I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna press save, enter. And then if I, just go to the first item on the list here, it's gonna do it in one of my user slots. But if I press page, then I can go current kit and save that to my SD card. Or if I press this again, then I can select all kits, all my custom kits, and save them to the SD card, which I'm gonna do right now because I think I did some edits. So let's go ahead and save that. And then just press enter again, overwrite, that's okay. And now I just saved all of my internal kits, or my custom kits, to an SD card that's in the back. So yeah, pretty amazing, that you can do all this stuff on this module that is, a lot of people don't even know about this thing or even know that it exists. And then some people got it and hated it. Like I know that happened. Like I've seen reviews where people were just tearing these things apart. But honestly, I think it's really cool. But anyway, let me go ahead and show you these custom kits. And then after that, I'm going to show you this full song that I made using this synthwave patch right here. All right, as you can see, I went ahead and threw in some of the presets that I liked as well. Some of those are actually quite good, honestly. I mean, for what it is, you know, given that I picked this thing up for so cheap, and considering it was largely just not well received by the public, I actually think it was, you know, undeservedly bashed when it came out. I think this module is pretty darn good, especially if you take the time to program your own sounds. I think that, you know, it's got some really interesting stuff in there. For me, I will definitely be using this for recording because I kind of look for unique sounds and things that aren't really exactly like everything else that you hear all the time. Like, I get really sick of hearing, you know, the same cookie cutter drum sounds that all sound exactly the same. I look for things that are unique, and I think this module is quite unique. So anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. That's the SD1000 by Simmons. If you can find one, you could probably get one for really cheap right now. I think it's going to be a classic in the future, so try to find one right now while you can. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the bell icon if you like this kind of content, and I will see you all really soon. Have a great day.